Hey golfers, I'm Drew Mahol, the Second Swing Golf. We're back in the studio for YouTube Live. For our Live at Lunch,
Yeah.
Tyler Fitzel's with as well. This is a fun one because I think for a lot of us, it's our favorite week of the year.
Yeah.
So it's the big tournament, the Masters, is going on now. And we have a lot to get to on the equipment side, which we'll get to. But Tyler, just what's your favorite part about the week? It's obviously a massive tournament. There's all kinds of lore with the course, and also with just the history of the tournament. But what's your favorite part? And I know you've been to Augusta a couple times. So
I look at it as like the oldest memories I have of golf are around the Masters.
yeah,
And a lot of it was just it's in the springtime, and whether it was it didn't matter if it was, grandparents that I had that were visiting around Easter, right, and this time of the year where I don't have it wasn't a golf thing, but I was, getting interested in golf. And so you'd see this spectacular Masters. And we always knew it was the same course. You knew that it was just this, the layout was always exceptional. And it starts on the back nine on Sunday.
yeah,
Like, so there's just this history, this rich history with it. And that's not to say that the other majors aren't, don't have history.
Right.
Like all the majors have history, but this one is just because it's always in the same spot, same time of the year, the azaleas bloom, things like that.
it's. I think we had an interview with Kevin Streelman that's actually up now on the YouTube channel. Kevin Streelman, two-time PGA Tour winner. He said something along the lines of Augusta National. It's rare, but it's the place you go for a tournament where the course is actually maybe more famous than the players are. And it's certainly true. So before we get into some equipment stuff, we also got to touch on one of our second swing ambassadors, someone who's been getting fit and working with us for a long time now. Bella McCauley played in the Augusta National Women's Amateur last week. So cool event that Augusta National has added to the calendar to kind of put a highlight on not just women's golf, but women's amateur golf. And Bella qualified, was invited as, I believe the criteria she met was top 30 among American amateurs.
Yeah.
And so I know we have some photo and some video that we captured and are going to show of her, but really cool experience for her. She's been working with our fitter Aaron Roth for like a decade, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And really cool for her. She unfortunately missed the cut by one shot, but nonetheless she got to play Augusta a couple times. That's really cool. I know you've been working with her and you've seen her before too. It's been awesome.
And so I think about that in terms of clubs too. Her father has been she has a sister, Reese.
Yep.
And their dad has been the swing guy, the coach. It's such a unique dynamic, but it's the coolest thing if you get to meet any of them, because they're all such like they're just
there's a humility,
very
for sure.
down to earth and very appreciative, and like it doesn't seem like the moment ever gets bigger than it needs to with them.
We're seeing too on the stream. We got some videos from the event of some of the shots she hits. Some really good ones here, but this is from Champions Retreat. She got to play the first 2 days there, and I believe her scores were 75-69, and the cut ended up being 1 under. So she was just one shot off. But she actually, this is their final hole here, where she on a par 5 ended up with about an 18-footer that she needed to make, and she just grazed the edge to miss the cut. But nonetheless, all we've heard on the feedback is that it was obviously, I know you said her dad was in the store telling some stories, so obviously really cool. And she's also, in terms of drive, chip, and putt, Sam Udovich as well, another member of the Second Swing kind of ambassador team. And I know you've worked with Sam over the years too, so kind of cool to have these homegrown right here in Minnesota that are making big waves at Augusta National.
Well, and they're from the same course. They play out of Southview Country Club, and there's others as well from that golf course that are elite golfers. They're these young junior golfers, and there's kind of that culture that developed amongst them. And we're talking about very level-headed, thoughtful, appreciative golfers, and that starts at the top. It starts with the staff at the golf course itself, but it also comes from the parents and the relatives around them too. And Sam won the 2000. I got to think now, 21
Yeah, that
Yeah,
might
I
be
think
right.
it was 2021. He won the drive, chip, and putt for his category. It was a 12-13.
And now he's, he played in the U.S. Am this last year, so he's already,
Yeah.
he's making some
Yep.
pretty big strides with
Yeah.
his young career. So
Correct.
So yeah, we have some things to talk about as far as golf equipment. So I know Augusta National brings some unique challenges that players don't typically face throughout the rest of the tour season. So I think the big thing that jumps to my mind right away, and we were kind of talking about sort of what to discuss first, was the wedges. So when it comes to wedges, almost everybody puts together or has their team on their tour truck or whatever the case might be, build some unique grinds.
Yep.
So I know we've got, you can see that we got an image of, I think it was actually Vokey, the Vokey social media accounts posted kind of a unique look at a few grinds, and you can tell these are grinds that are not available to me or you or anybody really. I mean, these are something that was probably built on the truck specifically for players that needed certain things for this event.
Yeah.
And then also we should note that the low bounce K grind sort of option kind of stemmed from this idea that golfers needed something at Augusta for these firm, tight lies, but still that wide sole. Right?
Yeah. I would also make a point that these are the types of things you can order. So like what we see in terms of customization, like these grinds on the wedges, those are things that some of the companies are also doing as customization. So that's something that you could get, and or even customizing stuff through our custom shop.
Yeah, the build shop can do things like this for you.
This is one of the reasons why when we talk about our tour van as being, it's not a mobile van. It's where we house all of the options.
Right.
Like a player at the Augusta might go in and using some of these different options. What you're looking for is especially that leading edge and then the trailing edge. So you're looking at, say, how is this going to get into the turf? Then how's it going to get out of the turf? And we've talked about this with wedges before. So is if you can really make something steeper that digs in, or if you create more bounce in a certain area or less bounce in a certain area, you might be able to slide that through the turf a different way. The challenging part at Augusta is that you're required so much precision. And so when you're talking about like the fairway or even the first cut, I don't want to use the wrong technical term because there are actual technical terms. They don't want to, it's
second
not
cut and first cut.
Yeah. First cut, second
rough.
cut. It's not rough.
Right.
And even for that, it's like, if you've seen it, if you've been there or seen it, what we would kind of consider that second cut or that rough is not really rough. But you have to be so exacting on where the ball goes, and
the
it's
way
more
the ball
about
sits is different than elsewhere.
But you can't just kind of put this 10 feet out to the left and it's just going to be okay. It has to be 9 feet specifically. It can't be 10 or 11 feet. It can't be 8 feet.
Right. That's how the green complexes are too. Where I mean, you can see it if anybody's been watching one of the first streams that the Masters had up was, or ESPN Plus, I think you can watch it. But holes 4, 5, and 6, and hole 6, you have that pins on that back of that slope. But basically, if you aren't within 9 feet of that pin up top, it'll fall all the way back, and you'll have a 60-foot lag putt. There's little things like that. So when it comes to the wedges too, around the greens, a lot of other courses in really the country or that these guys face on tour, whether it's overseas or in America, there's rough. There is longer grass where you will maybe need some more bounce, or more bounce will help you. But so much of Augusta around the greens is not that. It's trimmed a little bit where there's the sloping, and the different lies you face are more of the challenge versus the rough and the longer grass. So you just see a lot of these different things, and I thought I wanted to call that out because the low bounce K grind option that it's now kind of a stock option from Vokey is stemming from this idea of players playing on firm lies, needing still to have a wide sole, but also needing low bounce.
Right.
That's where it came from. So another equipment change I wanted to hint this week or touch on, Victor Hovland has famously stayed in the G425 LST for years. Obviously, that's a series that's now, 4 years old. But this is the week that he is making the swap to G440 LST. So I guess talk to me about what you have seen yourself fitting G440. Maybe if you have a theory on why Victor is making the switch this week of all weeks to go into something that's newer.
I would look at the technology, especially with.
By the way, we got to look at those T marks on that. The
yeah.
guy is we're talking about dialed.
Yeah,
Someone that hits the ball the same way.
Looks just like mine, but anyway. But I would say that a lot of what you're going to look at in equipment changes, especially when you get into like the driver here, is what's it doing. So in terms of it might be a little bit more about launch or spin. So when you're talking about a driver, some of the key characteristics, he's probably not worried about ball speed. He hits it in the middle. He's getting a ball speed, but it's going to be about launch and spin. So something in the G425 was he could get more out of the G440. Yeah. And my guess is it's probably more about launching and spinning, and more specifically spinning than anything, because when you get into at Augusta, driving accuracy is more important than driving distance, but you also need to drive it very far.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, you want to hit certain areas with slopes that take your ball to a better spot. But you will want to be able to do that through spin. And so it's also controlling the spin. My guess is that what Ping has told us about the technology is that the amount of weight and the movability of that weight has produced better results in terms of shot shaping. So what he might get out of that is maybe more control in terms of his shot shape.
Yeah, which he likes to play, this big power fade.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the unique thing now about some of these big hitters at Augusta. You know, I think back in the day, used to need to shape the ball.
Right.
A lot of these tee shots required the draw, required the fade.
Yeah.
But Victor now has the speed. A lot of these guys have the speed and power to just play their big fade, or
Yeah.
they launch it high enough and can control the spin to hit their big fade on any tee shot out there and hit it in the right spot. So to your point, I think the G440 LST it's kind of that next step up in their family, where it's the low spin head. You can still work the ball, and I think that's maybe lost on Ping's low spin drivers, because the talk is always forgiveness, how forgiving the low spin, the LST heads are with Ping. But clearly, if Victor Hovland can rely on it to play his big power fade, it's obviously working. So I'm just very curious to see how he does this week, especially off the tee, because he's a guy who's dominated off the tee. He's been one of the best drivers on tour the last several years. So he must have seen something promising with this driver.
Yeah, and if you look at kind of the areas of the game, especially when you're looking into the data side of things, driving distance is a category, but driving accuracy is also a category. You can get a little off at Augusta and still get it around, because we talked about this just a second ago. Is like there's the first cut, the second cut.
Yeah.
There's not. You might get under trees. You might get into straw. The lie might be something. You might have objects around you, but for the most part, there's nothing underneath the trees outside of, like, you don't have a ton of low-hanging branches. You can walk cleanly.
It's not like a
them.
U.S. Open where if you drive it wayward, you might be in some grass where you can barely see your golf ball. You won't really have that at Augusta. There's different challenges.
Right. And we've also seen that one of the things that drivers have continued to do, and generally speaking, major on the market, is that they're trying to take away spin so that you have a straighter ball flight. So a lot of the equipment that we have now is not conducive for Augusta in terms of shot shaping, right? Like if you're talking about a regular tour event, you can just go bombs away.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there's always tour events where you have to be able to control your ball a bit more, but when we start talking about the majors, you have to be able to control your shots. You start talking about, the tee shot on 13 really changed as they lengthened it out. Hitting a draw on 13, the par 5 there, is very, very difficult. Especially for a right-handed golfer. It's like you can get yourself into trouble. John Rahm said that one of the best shots he may have ever hit in his life was the draw he hit on the final day on 13.
This is when he won a couple years ago?
Yeah, when he won it a couple years ago. And he said it's like he doesn't like to see the draw. And in this case, it's kind of this 1 in a million shot, and he pulled it off.
Yep.
And had he not pulled it off, he's not wearing a green jacket.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, just to peek into the mind here. We're kind of getting, into maybe a different topic in a sense, but, he had a press conference this week and talked about hole 10, another hole that has a very stark right to left shape to it. and he mentioned there was a tree down on the far left side where the cabins are, and he's like, maybe I can hit a big cut over the trees on the left and bring it back over.
Yeah,
that's where his mind is going.
Right.
Is first, I'd rather look at that option, this big high power cut over the trees back into play, versus hitting the draw. So it's funny that you bring that up, because to your point, that's maybe something Victor is considering as a cut player himself.
Well, and
with this driver.
I was in a fitting earlier this morning, and I happened to see Scotty Scheffler tee off on number 10, and I had to kind of stop, and I took a double take, and the way that he contorted his body.
Oh, I know.
To try to hit the draw.
Seriously exaggerate.
Was I thought, did he hurt himself?
Yeah.
So that it definitely plays into it, and we'll talk a little bit more about drivers and mini drivers in a second too, because it's another equipment piece. But to kind of summarize on that, players are looking for a specific type of shot and shot pattern. Something about the G440 gave him that ability. The same thing was true. We saw some reports that Brooks Koepka had changed over to a Titleist GT3 driver. And again, with the new GT3 driver, you've got weight that goes down and forward. So center of gravity is that way. You can control launch and spin a little different. Now you have weight up front. It's closer to the ball. That can really kind of change a little bit of shot shaping with it. So the types of equipment changes that we see have been tested. This isn't something like hasn't been done. Tiger's probably most famous for the idea of coming into a major. He's never going to have to tweak his equipment.
Yeah.
He's got things set up for that golf course, and that, I think, is where a lot of these professionals now draw upon that experience. We used to see a lot of players come in with a lot of equipment changes.
Yeah.
And now they're coming in with equipment changes. It's just not
They've been
the
working
week
on
of.
them. They've been working. So to that point,
Yeah.
and we'll get to mini drivers here. But I was fortunate to be on the kind of a couple of the tour trucks a few weeks. This is actually over a month ago now. We were talking about Bay Hill. I was on the Cleveland and Shrixon tour truck, and we watched some wedges being built for Keegan Bradley. And in further communication with some of the reps on the truck, these were wedges specifically for Augusta.
Yeah.
So it's a wedge set for him, and we're over a month out. And so and these were things that the plan was to, between the different events he had leading up, he was going to be working on these wedges, testing them out, getting the feel from dialing them in way ahead of time. So he's not doing it the week of.
Right.
To your point. So, all right. I'm going to get to this mini driver conversation.
Yeah.
So mini drivers are all the rage right now. You're seeing, and I think we're starting to realize too, that they're more playable and more applicable for more golfers than we realized, as far as the amateur level goes. But this is the pro level, and we're seeing the new Callaway Elite mini driver.
Yep.
Getting a ton of buzz. I think Minwoo Lee is one of the mainstays, main big names that's playing the Elite mini driver this week.
Yep.
I think maybe Akshay Bhatia may also be playing one.
I think so, yeah.
As a lefty. I guess what specifically with mini drivers at this level in this tournament do you see as the advantage for these guys, and why they'd put one in the bag? Because you're seeing there's a couple other guys too. Justin Thomas put one in this week.
Yep.
Other big names
Fleetwood.
that haven't played one before, or maybe are kind of flipping on and off. Why would this week call for one?
Well, let me take you back several years ago in the Masters when a certain lefty named Phil Mickelson decided to put two drivers in the bag and win.
Yep.
Well, he basically put a mini driver in as one of them,
right,
and he put a regular driver in as the other, and that's the whole point. He also won a British Open without a driver, right?
Which at the time, I think he ended up building something that was similar to a mini driver at that tournament.
It was 13 degrees. It was a little bit longer than his normal 3 wood. He could hit it off the tee and keep it low and direct it. He had 2 3-woods.
Right.
This is exactly what the players do. We just now have more of a defined category for it. So some of the things that are different about drivers. So we call it driver versus mini driver. Well, length is one of them. You might want to have something that's a little bit shorter than your other driver, kind of your standard driver. That may give you some more control options. So for instance, you want a mini driver that does something on a particular hole or a set of holes. I know Tommy Fleetwood had said at the beginning in his clip.
He's playing the burner this week.
In his clip, he had mentioned that an example was hole number 2. He probably doesn't have the length on hole number 2, the par 5, to get it all the way to the bunker that sits at the top of the hill. And so I did see that Justin Thomas was in front of that bunker today, got all the way down to the flat, you know, chipped up. The same sort of thing. If Tommy Fleetwood has this idea, I don't need to go into that bunker because I can't get out of it. So this will just get me up in front of it.
Yeah.
Now he's got a shot that he can handle going into that green if he's got enough length or distance, and he could very well just use the mini driver again.
Right. And with that second hole, too, the way that flag is set up, I believe it's the back left right now, players are almost not even trying to go on the green. They're instead trying to play it short right to have that angle to go up. And so to your point,
instead of trying to make a driver do that,
yes, right,
you just get another club that does that. And that was what Phil did originally was, and I don't remember which was which. My guess is that the longer driver that he had was easier to play a cut with, and the shorter one was easier to play a draw with.
Right. It's basically giving the golfer multiple go-to options off the tee. So, and perhaps, like you said, it's two different shot shapes, or maybe it is a distance thing out there where so many of the holes now, they're kind of trying to protect it against the length. And so Augusta's making these subtle refinements, or they're adding tee boxes or whatever it might be to make it more of kind of the classic traditional target golf where, a player might want something that's 20, 25 yards shorter than their driver. Then they bring in this mini driver that's a little bit more loft, a little shorter shaft, not quite a 3-wood, because so many of these guys now, too, don't even need to. There's no reason for them to plan to hit a 3-wood off the ground because so many of the par 5s aren't quite that long where they're going to need to hit that far, with the exception of like a Bernhard Langer out there. But, the mini driver category, it's been fascinating to see how these guys have applied it to their bags, to their game, and Augusta offers a lot of opportunities to make it in there. So the Elite Mini Driver, I after testing it myself, think is a rocket launcher. So I think Minwoo Lee, especially, who has all kinds of ball speed, he could easily hit that thing over 300 yards without a problem.
Well, and there's more to come. There's maybe
a
few more mini drivers. They're going to hit the market.
Yes. I don't know how much further we can tease, but there might be something coming soon.
Well, we've seen, Instagram's kind of got the Cobra driver. We've seen that, whatever its name ends up being.
Right, and they still haven't indicated for sure. I know there was one floating around, and if I know Ricky Fowler, I don't even think he's not even in the field this week, but I know he had been toying with one. So, but yeah, there's other models out there that might be coming to market soon. So, all right, this is my favorite story of the whole thing, though. I wanted to get to this. Sahith Theegala. So, this guy, I mean, I don't want to use the term head case because
head case is what you would determine
because it has a negative connotation. But the story with him from the tour truck. So this is firsthand. Adam, I think it's Harding is his last name. He's kind of their head technician on the tour truck.
Yes.
Initially told the story to, I think it was Johnny Wonder, who's director of equipment over at golf.com now.
Correct.
Then Ping's official accounts posted something from him as well.
Yeah.
Fascinating story. So you can correct me, Tyler, if I'm telling any of this wrong, but Sahith is he's picky about his irons.
Yeah.
And so the story goes he has 2 8-irons.
Yes.
And basically a pitching wedge that is an 11-iron in his bag now.
Correct.
So the 2 8-irons comes from, there was a tournament in which, or maybe a round where he hit his 7-iron so poorly that he went to the tour truck and said, I don't want a 7-iron in my bag. So what Ping did was they built, his 7-iron length, loft, specs, everything, and then kind of basically brushed off the 7 and printed an 8 on there.
Yes.
So he has an 8-iron that's the standard, engraving and everything on there on the heel or on the sole, and then he's got an 8-iron that's printed that is a 7-iron.
Yes.
And now we're learning this week. I think this is the new part, is the pitching wedge part.
Yes.
So similar thing happened where with his iron set, by the way, he's playing Blueprint S irons. So I know we've got some photos that we're showing of these now. So he's got this 11-iron in the bag, and that is his pitching wedge. So it's the same thing where he hit a pitching wedge poorly.
Yes.
And now instead of putting a P on the club, Ping will brush that off. They'll print an 11 on there. And they said Sahith's reason for the number 11 was, well, there's guys that have a 10-iron in the bag, and I need an 11.
Yes.
I need to ask you, Tyler, have you ever heard of anything like this at any level? Something that's being as picky as this?
Yeah, absolutely. To the idea that you start renaming them, that's where the confidence level comes from, knowing I've got the equipment in my hand, but also knowing what I'm doing with it. I say yes because I remember listening to a podcast way a long time ago, and again, we think about Bryson DeChambeau. Okay, we think about the peculiarity of his equipment and what he wants to do and how he does it. We've seen these things before. Okay, so you can put whatever you want on it, but it's what you do with it that counts. And going even further back, I would mention that I think Phil, at least for the short-term history in a context, Phil was doing this with a lot of his equipment too. The Frankenwood idea. We talked about 2 drivers. Getting them 64 degrees aloft. Like bringing a lot of different ideas to the forefront in terms of equipment. But Phil, on his podcast a long time ago, had mentioned that he had basically a 7 and an 8 iron with the same lie and the same loft on them. But the difference was the length.
Yeah.
And they both fit the ball flight that he wanted. And so you have a club that is essentially like identical in its the shape and the form, but they just one says 7, one says 8 on it.
Yeah.
But if he needed a flight that had a fade, he hit one club. If he needed a flight with the draw, he hit the other one.
It goes back to this. The bottom line in any club fitting is like the fitters are trying to get you 14 clubs that all serve a very distinct purpose for you. And however they're labeled, however whatever that might be, in a sense is up to you. I mean, there's certain capabilities we might not have to some extent that Sahith Theegala has. But even further on the Sahith Theegala story is when I was on the tour truck, a month ago or so, it was a similar thing with a wedge that week. So he plays this 59-degree wedge, but the idea of a 62-degree, the number 62 on the sole is because they would bend a 62 degree to make it 59 for him. He hated that idea of the number 62 being on the club. So they brushed it off similar to they did for this 11 iron for him. And then they just hand stamped 59 ST on the back of it, on like kind of on the back side of the club.
Sure.
So the sole has nothing on it. It's just blank.
Right.
And then on the backside, you have 59 ST for Sahith Theegala, and it's that 6 bounce grind they have.
Okay. That tour grind, yeah.
So there's down to 3 or whatever with the 59 degree essentially. So, but it's just this mental thing with Theegala that certain numbers must just give him problems mentally.
Yeah.
But clearly, I mean, it works for the guy. He's playing in the Masters.
I think back to a couple things. A long time ago, Tommy Armour had the 8. I believe it was the 855. Well, I'm sure it might have been the 845 Silver Scots, where up on the high toe on the face of the club, they had the loft number stamped. Okay. I've seen this multiple times with different players as well. Some players will actually write on the back the loft of the club, like in a permanent marker type thing. Sometimes players will they will also write the yardage. Like I've seen I've had customers come in where on the back of the 7 iron it goes, this is my my 145 club, and it's like I said, what's the 145? Well, that's how many yards I hit this, and I part of this can just be for him is to put his mental, put this at ease.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If it's actually 59, I want 59 on it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I would say there's another quick story that I had seen recently. I believe Smiley Kaufman was interviewing Ben Crenshaw, and I saw this yesterday, and he had made the comment that back in the day with his caddy playing at Augusta, they didn't use yardages. Like
really?
Ben Crenshaw and his caddy didn't talk in yardages. They just talked about what club they're going to hit. And, so we think about these ideas and go, well, that's crazy. Well, it's not if it works, right? He's a 2-time Masters champ.
Yeah, he won the Masters twice.
And one of the greater players, in the history of the game. But we look at it and we say, oh, man, well, a little bit of a head case. Well, on the other side of it is this is what golfers do, and we do it broadly and in general. We all have our own way of looking at it. That's where I think what you mentioned is I'm in a fitting, especially in our context as trying to get the right clubs in the bag. It's the right clubs. I don't care if the club says it's a 5 hybrid if it has the right loft and it's the next club in my bag.
Yep. Right. No, you're. Yeah.
So the way I the terminology that I like to use a lot is like, what's the next club?
Mm-hmm.
Not that it has to be, well, am I going to have a 4-iron? No, I just need the next club.
Yep.
And I'm going to have a 3-wood? No, I just need the next. I don't. Maybe it is a 3-wood on the bottom.
Yep.
Nowadays companies have 4 woods at 17 or 16 and a half. And then some companies have 3-wood with 16 and a half on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it is in a sense, the way the lofts have changed on clubs, but at the end of the day, and I think it was even the Hogan irons back in the day, or maybe even still too, would put
Just
the
put a
loft
loft
on there, and
on
that's it. So maybe there's something to that as equipment
I think it's awesome.
evolves and
another cool part about Augusta is that it's a little unique and rare in that none of the manufacturers or the tour trucks are allowed on site. You can have a rep, one rep, maybe that's 2, or you can have your swing guy or whatever. But they have all of the trucks end up in parking lots across the street or just across the street. So you can go over, do something. You have a guy, you have a representative
like
from
a
the
liaison
company.
of some kind,
that can come over and hand those clubs to caddies that can go out in the range, so it's right by the range. And a lot of that stuff is going to happen. They'll probably have their trucks there even the weekend before, like you've got drive, chip, and putt and the women's happening the weekend before, and most of the time those trucks will be there even extra early because you got a lot of players coming in and just kind of feeling things out. So it's a very unique space for equipment. Augusta's unique in where they have space to put trucks and what the process for getting equipment in and out of the grounds, what they're going to use, how they're going to use it. And now, again, they added another layer to our information feed. And remember, this year they decided, I don't know if you saw this yet, they decided we're going to record every TrackMan data piece
I did
on
see
the
this,
range
yep.
and the practice area.
Well, they were tracking it. It was like Homa and Bryson hit like 240 balls on Tuesday, I think it was.
Bryson had 300 and something.
Oh, my goodness.
Like almost 400 golf balls, I think, in one day. But every shot's tracked.
Yeah, there's launch monitor data, there's launch angle, the ball speed. It's carried, you can, if you're a golf sicko, this is exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You could sit there and
but
you could probably still even today or tomorrow throughout the weekend. There's probably a live from the range feed, and I think that's how it works.
And but that's what we want. Like as a fitter too, I want as much information as possible to make a decision on. And the thing that ends up happening is you've got feedback. And feedback helps to drive decisions. So we talk about like these irons, and I'm going to put 11 on it. Well, why did a company put 10 instead of pitching wedge, or 11 instead of gap wedge? Like, it's different. It's unique. It helps separate them. It makes them what they are. And you remember a couple years ago, Mira that teamed up with, for who they teamed up with, Jack Nicklaus, and did the clubs with colors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, grab the green dot, or what was it?
There was a custom set of his. I can't remember exactly how.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like it doesn't have to be a 6.75 or a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 iron. It's just wild. It's cool to see Tagala kind of go. Basically, he can get what he needs to have his mentality focused right on what needs to be achieved, which is the golf shots that he needs to hit. So, anyway. One more. I know we kind of touched on it already, but Brooks Koepka switching to the GT3. You brought that up from QI10. He's an equipment free agent when it comes to his driver.
Yeah.
He's hit all kinds of different drivers over the years. As someone who I'm a Brooks guy a little bit, so I've been following that. He's been in TaylorMade forever. And then I know he has played the Trixon driver in the past. And this is the first time I've seen him using Titleist. So that's another fascinating one to follow this week. And then I also just wanted to bring up here, too, we talked a lot about G440 LST. As of right now, it's 1:30-ish Central Time, Thursday. The clubhouse lead for Thursday is Corey Connors. At 4 under par. He's a G440 LST guy.
Yep.
And I know I didn't have this on the list, so I'm kind of throwing this up here briefly to discuss, but he's also testing. There's no details on this, but testing one of those kind of low torque putters. I think Ping built something for him this week.
Yeah, PLD.
Yeah. So another kind of name being added to that whole trend of low torque or zero torque
Right.
putters, and you're seeing a lot of those. Brian Harmon just won last week at Valero with
A new
something
TaylorMade that's
kind of a prototype
coming
deal.
out.
Yeah.
Yep.
So wanted to make note of that. You're seeing this
Well,
trend pick up a little bit in terms of putters as well.
That's a great conversation, because let's go back through the history of time, and especially in the majors for golf. The heel shafted 8802 style is the most winningest putter ever. That's going to be overtaken at some point. But let's talk about just because of the nature of the decades after, so long ago, everything was just, that was the putter, and it was kind of the only one. And then we started to see the advent of different. And so putting is actually a really super interesting conversation piece, especially at Augusta. Putting is very unique, and it's difficult because of the slopes and the speeds and such. We talk about that all the time. Bernhard Langer won the Masters. I got to remember now. Sorry.
I think his were 85 and 93.
Yeah. I got to remember this correctly. Vijay Singh won the Masters with a Dandy putter. Dandy was the name. It's a Minnesota company. Because I've had a couple customers that have come in and said, "Oh yeah, they've got the putter that he won, that Vijay won the Masters with." It's very unique, and we think back to Jack in Jack Nick
86 with
86, the
he had
big McGregor, the response.
Yep.
And we go, okay, that blew up in popularity, and it did because it was unique. We think about Adam Scott winning with a long putter, which I think was the first long putter win.
For a major, it might have been, yeah.
Well, yeah, and for a major, but just even just talking about the Masters. You start talking about the uniqueness of what happens with putting. Putting is one of those things that you've got to kind of get hot. And like we said, Nicholas was playing with that response putter kind of maybe a week or a couple weeks before, and things were working well, and he didn't have the expectation of winning, but all of a sudden he got the thing rolling, and he did. And we also go back kind of to the iconic, right? So how many times has Scotty Cameron has won at the majors?
Yeah.
You talk about really once Tiger kind of put, I don't want to say this, but like Tiger put Scotty Cameron on the mark.
I mean,
in terms of that
we just did a whole
brand.
video on these gold putters that we've now got at our store in Scottsdale and Dallas, where you're right. I mean, that era, right when Tiger burst onto the scene, is when Scotty Cameron's name also vaulted to the top of people's minds when it comes to putters. And those all started as these little, basically the Newport 2 was primarily the model.
Right.
And now you've seen it evolve into what it is now, and you have the whole Phantom series is totally different. The Studio style series has all these different looks to it.
Yep.
So, it's a finicky thing, the putters. But I wanted to mention that as we've talked a lot about zero torque and low torque and
exactly
how that has evolved. So, all right, we have a question in the YouTube chat. Crystal has been following the whole time, basically just asking for our picks, and so it's perfect because I know that was what we were gonna kind of start to wrap with. So, picks this week, Tyler. I know we have this sort of internal company kind of call it competition.
Yeah.
Sort of a fantasy type of deal. I can bring up the actual names that you had in your lineup.
Sure.
Essentially, the way the rules go is we had it's kind of broken down by, I think, odds to win. So there's a top 10 and then 10 to 20, 20 to 30. So you can't just pick like Scheffler, McIlroy, Morikawa, right?
No.
But what you had for yours was Scheffler.
Yep.
Sky Scheffler. That's a wild pick,
Yeah, and even for us, it's he was picked in our grouping of nearly 250-ish people in the company. Is like for us, and we're not wagering anything. Sorry, like we don't have to pay for this. It's just
we're just in there. Yeah, it's just
sports gambling.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some of those out there, but 30% of our picks were Scotty Scheffler in that first category, which makes sense.
He's off to a good start.
He is. He's at -3, at least what I'm seeing currently. He does everything well, which is why he's so good, and especially more importantly, his approach to the green, and his around the green is so far above the tour average,
Yeah.
which gives him more opportunities. And so
Yeah.
that's a big piece.
So speaking of approach, you have Russell Henley in here. You
Yep.
have Cameron Smith in there.
Yep.
Justin Rose.
Yep.
Daniel Berger and Michael Kim, who's been playing well. So
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm looking at the leaderboard right now, and you're off to a solid start as far as the whole company is concerned with your picks. It's a pretty good start right there.
Yeah, if I'm in fifth place out of nearly 250. It's so I guess my picks are doing well for the moment. The problem, of course, is always that this is the Thursday almost afternoon.
Right, yeah.
Like half
there's
the field
a
is probably
lot of golf
Yeah,
left. But Justin Rose is he's also carrying my team too. He's tied for the lead at the moment. So,
Okay.
but yeah, with my picks, I'm a big Colin Morikawa guy this week.
Okay.
I think Morikawa has only finished really well this year in particular, and he's also got all kinds of good finishes at Augusta. Last year, of course, he was right there.
Yes.
With Scotty. So Colin Morikawa was my kind of the big guy I think that was going to really contend this week. He's also off to a solid start. I think he fell back a little bit to 1 under there. He was in the 3 under range. But then for me too, I stuck with Henley. I'm with you on that. Sepp Straka is another name that is hitting the ball really well. He's a key member of he's going to be another European Ryder Cupper for a lot of years to come.
Yes.
Justin Rose as well. Aaron Rye was one of my guys too. Got off to a really good start.
Yep.
And I also picked Austin Eckroat. I want to give a shout out to the commercial, the Second Swing commercial that we just started airing, featuring Austin Eckroat. So picked him this week. But Morikawa is my guy this week. I think he's going to come out and win this thing. He's off to a solid start in that regard.
Right.
But yeah, those are the picks. So we'll see. We'll see how this shapes out. Obviously, Crystal made a note of Bryson, saying would love to see Bryson win. That is a long shot. Putting hasn't been good this year. I also think with Bryson, he's making some crazy equipment changes right now. Like I don't think he made it clear in his press conference a day or two ago that he was still trying to find a driver for this week, and he was testing all kinds of different things. So I think I don't want to say he's in his own head because I think he's always in his head about something.
Yeah.
But that's one where he's made some comments in the past about Augusta, and I think last year it's finally the year he had a strong showing.
You know, when we talk about custom fitting too, it kind of bounces back to this idea about tinkering.
Yeah.
Like if you're always doing something different or looking for something different, don't expect the same.
Yeah.
But if you're always doing something different or trying to do something different and you're getting the same, this is where the two roads kind of cross. So I would say that Bryson has always been one to tinker with different clubs and the styles and his swing. So when he gets into form and he's just trying to do one thing only with his equipment, he can obviously be very dangerous in terms of, climbing up the leaderboard, staying.
He won the U.S. Open last year.
Yeah, and he was second at the PGA, and he was sixth at the Masters.
Right.
And the hard part, I think, is to kind of evaluate based on where the two tour, like kind of the tours are with the Live Tour, and we are seeing some of the other players that are more predominant on the Live side playing in some of the DP World events, and they're getting into some, some. I'd say being eligible for Ryder Cup is a part of that. I also look at it as saying these guys want to perform, and so this is kind of their showcase when you start talking about Live, and this is certainly not a conversation about the two tours. But if I'm measuring what you're doing on one tour versus 60 guys and about a handful of them are some of the better players, like versus what you're doing on the PGA Tour against, twice as many players on a week by week basis.
Yeah, it's certainly a different. It's tough to measure that, and it's always a little bit of a wild card as to how these guys show up. I mean, they've performed well in majors.
Yeah,
I remember a couple years ago it was like Mickelson, Reed, and those guys Koepka were all at the top. And then Rahm ended up going over there. So but nonetheless, it's we'll see what happens.
I think
you got a pretty good squad there. With your team. So.
I did it based on data, and I got to shout out Mark Olson. He's our fitter in Minnetonka, and he showed me a little bit about some of the different data points, and I'm looking at it, going back in through history, like what have they been doing this year? Are they rising, falling? Where are some of the things moving? So if I'm going to get back to the store, I'll see him and thank him again, because it was funny. He was using kind of more of a data point last year in some of the choices he was making, and he's just, he did really well. And I'm thinking, you can make a decision and that might not work, but you have to look at more of a long term and then also a short term. So you have guys that perform very well.
Yeah.
I looked at a guy like Justin Rose and I said,
who is, by the way, now the solo leader as of just, it must have been moments ago, 5 under par.
Yeah, so now I'm only fourth, alone in fourth, huh? Yeah, all right. So the big thing is that I'm looking at it as a longevity. Justin Rose always plays very well here. My first comment to some of the guys that I'm picking is, all right, are they on the uptrend? Are things going well? And will they make the cut? Because if you don't make the cut, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right? That's one. Obviously, number two, giving any of these guys a chance to win. If any of these guys do win, that's a huge benefit. So that's kind of how I played it. The Masters has a great one. If you weren't able to get in right away at the beginning, I strongly suggest doing it again next year. And that
the fantasy.
Yeah, it's just really cool. You got to pick a past winner. You got to pick an international. You got to pick a U.S. player. You got to pick
a first timer,
a wild card.
Yeah,
and
that's fun.
And then the tie-break question's always funny. So the tie-break question is, well, it was this year anyway.
How many total putts?
How many total putts amongst the tournament are going to be made? And so I decided, well, I'll Google, how many putts are made in a Masters tournament and what pops up. It starts typing it in for me. So it was one of the number one Google searches.
Of course.
Because we're interested in that side of it.
Yeah. That's it's crazy. That's where we're at now. I mean, it's the fantasy side of things. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what we got today. This was a fun live at lunch, and this will be a fun one too for people to tune into throughout the weekend as the tournament unfolds, and maybe some of the stuff we're saying about some of the players will be total hogwash on Sunday, but maybe some of the things will be correct. So it's nonetheless, it was fun to kind of focus on the tournament this week, some equipment stuff. I think the one last piece I'm going to say before I let you sign off in your signature way is that next week we have a fun one. Titleist GT with Tom Fisher. If you're not familiar with Tom Fisher, he's been on our videos before. He's a fantastic character. We're talking all things Titleist GT, the launch, adoption of the new stuff with GT 280. That'll be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that next week at 1 o'clock Central. Yep. Tyler, thank you, sir, for stopping by, talking equipment.
Always great to be here.
It was a great time.
All right. Keep your grooves clean. Stay razor sharp.